Yeah, let's everyone take a breath, center themselves, rest, and open with the word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to gather, to read from the scriptures, to discuss them, to share. Ask that you help us all be receptive, open, prepared to listen, prepared to learn, prepared to hear. And thank you for those who have made it. And also offer a word of prayer that everyone will remain safe through the ice storm over the next couple of days. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Jump in. I think I want to save the collect toward the end to discuss after going through some of the text. Just looking at it and looking at the text, we have this one. I do want to, whether we're reading it on Sunday or not, I do want to start with Isaiah because this is a particularly vivid set of imagery and everything. If someone would like to read that.
I can read it.
Sure.
Go ahead, Fred.
In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2, they covered their faces, and with 2, they covered their feet, and with 2, they flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The pivots on the thresholds shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. The seraph touched my mouth with it and said, Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed and your sin is blotted out. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. And he said, Go and say to this people, Keep listening, but do not comprehend. Keep looking, but do not understand. Make the mind of this people dull, and stop their ears, and shut their eyes, so that they may not look with their eyes, and listen with their ears, and comprehend with their minds, and turn and be healed. Then I said, How long, O Lord? And he said, Until cities lie waste without inhabitant, and houses without people, and the land is utterly desolate, until the Lord sends everyone far away, and vast is the emptiness in the midst of the land. Even if 1/10 part remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains standing when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump.
Thanks. This is the imagery when he finds himself before the Lord sitting on a throne. It's placed in the year King Uzziah died, which obviously we don't have exact dating for things in ancient history, but generally is placed around 734 BCE, where most people place where this is setting the story in the ministry of Isaiah. There are things in what he's told, but one of the things that I want to, there's a lot of imagery here that's in Christian worship. We see the thrice holy hymn, holy, holy, holy. This is where it comes from. Christians have always taken the imagery of the coal taken from the altar and put to the mouth as a symbol of the Eucharist, prefiguring a symbol of the Eucharist. Again, that's a very Christian reading. Obviously, it's not the way Jewish people read the text. I am always struck in this by the tension between Isaiah 6 and Isaiah 11. Because in the Thrice Holy hymn, Holy, Holy, Holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory, which is, of course, what we all say. But in 11, it says, they shall not hurt nor be able to destroy anyone on my holy mountain in the time when everything will be fulfilled. For the whole world shall be filled with the knowledge of the Lord. So there's something in between. The whole earth is full of his glory right now, but we don't see it. It is not full. We don't have the knowledge. We don't have the perception of the Lord filling everything, filling and sustaining everything. This is one place where I do like the new King James. After he sends them, he says, go and tell the people, you shall hear indeed, but not understand, and you shall see indeed, but not perceive. Which makes it a little bit clearer than the rendering, keep listening, but do not comprehend. That you're hearing, you're seeing, but you're not taking it in. It's part of the tension of the whole earth is full of his glory. That's what the seraphim are, the whole choir is singing, but we don't see it. We don't perceive it. We're seeing everything in the world. We're seeing the world that is filled with his glory, but we're not perceiving that glory. And that's what he is told to say to the people. Those are some of the things in here that have always struck me in this passage of Isaiah. Anyone else have anything that stood out to them?
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm glad you. It makes more sense the second way that maybe the King James hear but do not understand. When I first read this time, I just thought, what? What are you talking about? So yeah, I like going back to that. That's biblical translation, man.
It's hard to do. Yeah, it's hard to translate from different languages and cultures and settings.
Yeah, I highly recommend that you look at Bible Gateway, all of you. It's a great, and you're nodding, because you can just pick the different translations, and sometimes it that way it just gives you, like, if you're like, that doesn't make sense, the Message tries to do it much more contemporary language. The Common English Bible, which is interestingly one of the translations that we are allowed to use for corporate worship. The Episcopal Church says use whatever Bible you want for your private, study or whatever. But when it's corporate worship, they have authorized a different number of translations, and the Common English Bible is one of them. And it also, like the new revised King James Version, it's just in some ways can be much clearer, right? Because it's not a word for word translation, but I think it can convey the meaning a little bit clearer. The other thing about this Isaiah passage, and this is where Deacon Victoria, Father David, Scott, anybody else who's looked at this, they talk about the book of Isaiah in kind of like three pieces. Is that right? Three, and they in first Isaiah, second Isaiah, third Isaiah. And so just the different chapters that are for these particular, how they've broken them up, that can help us also get a sense of this is pre-Isaiah, post-exilic, those kinds of things. And that context also can help us understand a little bit more of what the prophet and when the prophet is speaking to the community. And that's also helpful.
Mhm. I just wanted to say, this reminds me of Paul in Galatians. Now I see through a glass darkly, but then I shall see whole. And here Jehovah is saying the same sort of thing to Isaiah. You will see, but not right now. And these people will see, but not right now.
And isn't that what Jesus tells a lot of these folks too? Especially people, he keeps saying to them, don't you read the scriptures? And you've been reading how long? And you've been studying these for how long? And yet, don't you see? There's this common thread about seeing, but not understanding, or hearing, but not really listening.
So Mike has a comment, and then I'll add my comment.
Yes, this part about the terebinth and burning an oak stump, that is such vivid agricultural life. Make a field more productive for raising grain and so forth and getting the trees out of it. I just mentioned that because I just thought it was cute.
So what I was going to remark, a lot like Madre Minerva did, that there seems to be a theme throughout the scriptures of how God speaks, God exposes himself, God is present. The words are there, but the people don't get it. And, we always get to chuckle about those dim-witted disciples who follow Jesus around, and they hear what he has to say. They hear how after he explains it to them, but there's still that theme that they just still don't get it. And, I kind of think that's really more a testimony of how the greatness of God is so incomprehensible that it's really hard for us mere mortals to understand and to hear. And when we do, we doubt ourselves.
Yeah. The other thing that I find that just this, the reaction that Isaiah has initially when he recognizes he's in the presence of the Lord, and this reaction of, I am not worthy. You need to leave, just leave, depart, because I am not worthy. And not only am I not worthy, I live among a community that is just not worthy. And the response from the Lord is to say, okay, it's almost like you've recognized your sin. And so what we're going to do is we're going to forgive. And there's forgiveness in that. And just think that how merciful that is. Instead of saying, yes, you're right, nobody's worthy, I'm leaving. But to say, well, I can make you worthy. I can forgive. And that forgiveness is what you need. And now you're ready. Carry on.
You can't get out of it now.
Well, he says, I heard, whom shall I send? And I said, me, right? He didn't have to. That's still an invitation. And the response for this gratitude of forgiveness is discipleship.
Mm-hmm. This particular, these two verses, or 3 verses, 6 through 8, about the live coal and being cleansed and so on. This scripture has been such an important part of people's discernment towards ministry. You know, it's been my privilege to sit on the Commission on Ministry and to help people discern their call to ordained ministry or lay ministry. And this story is a consistent thread in people's stories. That's how powerful this particular scripture is, and how powerfully people relate to that. I'm not good enough, but I've been cleansed, and I'm so grateful. Send me. I'm going to accept that call, even though I objected to it a whole lot.
Yeah. I'm going to
Scott,
raise.
have we moved away from where you wanted us to go?
No, I mean, I didn't have any preconceptions. Didn't prepare for this. I was just sharing things that I wanted. Oh, Mike has something else he wants to share.
Well, what we were just talking about reminded me of at least one occasion where I've been asked to be on a kind of on a discernment committee here for somebody who's thinking about attending the seminary, and talk about feeling unworthy. What in the hell am I doing trying to decide if somebody who's far advanced in the spiritual life than me has the gift or has the call? There's a feeling of unworthiness is certainly when you're called to almost any high office. And oh boy, did I get a laugh out of my nervous sermon a few weeks ago about being scared to death before the ordination. Boy, that was, I recognize those sensations. Okay, enough of that. God has something in store for us, I'm sure.
I mean, oh, go ahead, Madam.
I was just gonna say, you know, there is something at the end though, right? It's a little it's kind of foretelling of what's happened, right? Then I said, how long? And the description of how long is just really terrifying. And as we have been in a time where you look out and there's nobody on the street, you know, I never thought I would see that. I never thought I would see a city comes to a halt. And we have seen communities just, you know, I don't know if you remember 3 years ago when I stopped watching the news. You know, I would go upstairs and visit with my mom, and I'd look at the television, and they were showing they would scan London, and they'd scan New York, and they'd scan, I mean, very, very busy cities, Chicago and Tokyo. I mean, places where there's just so many people, and it is like not one car on the road, not one person, right? I mean, and just kind of this sense of this, I can see, I can understand better what some of the prophets and some of the scriptures talk about, when there was this just, they had to leave Jerusalem and there was nobody left behind, right? And how empty and quiet, and I really appreciate these writings even more, and can understand this ache, the ache that the prophets feel for, like, we can, you know, how do we avoid this, or how do we get out of this, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
The one last thing that I was thinking of deciding whether or not to share, because because my background was so mixed in so many different things, I don't really remember encountering Isaiah probably until I was a teen. May have seen it somewhere, but it didn't stick in my head. But when I did, this part of it just really struck me. And one of the reasons it did is because one of the things that I always did not exactly singing, but I would be repeating lyrics to myself over and over and over again, among the different things that I would say to myself. And part of that, since diagnosis, I've learned is delayed echolalia, and I also had immediate echolalia. But one of the songs I remember really all through when I was 9 years old, I can remember all the times, and there's so many different things that I found in it, but in particular, this part from Sound of Silence. In the naked light, I saw 10,000 people, maybe more, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening. And when I encountered this in Isaiah, that's exactly the image and what it meant to me that I heard, and what he was saying, you know, you will hear without understanding, you will see without perceiving, without recognizing it.
A lot of wisdom in rock and roll.
I just thought I'd share that as a personal connection, because that was one thing. That's why I really wanted the translation that made that more clear, because that was something that immediately connected to me. So moving on to the Psalm, would someone like to read it? 138.
Okay, I will. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods, I will sing your praise. I will bow down toward your holy temple and praise your name because of your love and faithfulness. For you have glorified your name and your word above all things. When I called, you answered me. You increased my strength within me. All the kings of the earth will praise you, O Lord, when they have heard the words of your mouth. They will sing of the ways of the Lord, that great is the glory of the Lord. Though the Lord be high, he cares for the lowly. He perceives the haughty from afar. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you keep me safe. You stretch forth your hand against the fury of my enemies. Your right hand shall save me. The Lord will make good his purpose for me. O Lord, your love endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands.
Thank you. Thank you. This is one of the songs of David, Psalm of praise, of thanksgiving. The thing that immediately stands out to me, reading it and hearing it, is when I called, you answered me. Anyone else have something that stood out to them?
Well, I really liked the way Anne read that. She has an excellent way of presenting the Psalms.
What you said, Scott, when I called, you answered me, always gets to me as well, because as I've said before, I don't think I've ever questioned my faith. I've always known that God is there. Sometimes I have to realize that I'm not listening. And sometimes I have to realize that the answer is no. You know, there's the concept that if I don't get what I want, that means God didn't answer my prayer. But God sometimes just says no.
The other way I would also add to that is that somebody else may have said no to, it did not answer the invitation, right? Because we are all given the invitation, and sometimes it requires another human to say yes in order for certain things to happen. And so in our interconnectedness, those invitations that other people pass can impact our lives.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
I love the whole heart. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, with my whole heart. And this one, before the gods, I will sing your praise. And that just reminds me of the gods that I pay attention to, and I don't give my whole heart to God sometimes, to the God, right? Because there's the God of money, there's the God of recognition, there's the God of all these little, we don't name them anymore as gods in our society. We say we have one God, but in many ways there are other things, minor, lower, lower G, lower that gods that take our time and attention, and that I sometimes don't wholeheartedly love God. And just that reminder that that is the God that I claim to be my God. And when those distractions come, and when those other gods call, to say no, thank you.
Very good point.
Yeah. And I like the way that you put out that he says, before the gods, I will sing your praise, because it's not really historically accurate to call the Abrahamic faith throughout their period monotheistic. We developed toward monotheism, but the more accurate term is henotheistic, worship of one God. And that's what God says in the commandment: you will put no gods before me. He doesn't say I'm the only God. Get there eventually, but he doesn't try making people see that right away. He says, you will not put any gods before me. I, the Lord your God, the Lord of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I am the Lord your God. You will worship no other gods before me. That's, and it was, and you see Israelites, you see through the whole narrative, worshiping other gods.
Yeah.
Even though it gets them in trouble
Gets them in trouble
time.
every time.
And
Yeah.
that's, and that's our, that's part of our human story, right? It just, our distractions to other glittery falseness is out there that distract us and, just lead us
There is
astray.
there is a certain honesty toward acknowledging the things, the forces, the things around which you shape your life, you shape your being, you shape who you are as a human being. There's a certain honesty in acknowledging those as gods openly.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that that's the thing for what's been helpful for me, as people have said to me. It's not that it's not that you claim that what gets you in trouble is not when you is not willing to recognize those things that are your distractions, right? It's those blind spots, right? It's to say, I have them, I'm aware of them, I need to own them. And so that way you don't hide them, right? It's when you hide them, or you pretend that they don't exist, that they get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And so people say that about shame, right? Bring them to light, bring those things to light so that it doesn't consume you. But that's, I think, the calling them out and saying, I see you and you're not good for me. I recognize, and I'm trying, and I'm working to. Deacon Victoria, you're leaning in.
I am leaning in.
Literally leaning in.
Literally leaning in, because there was something that struck me, and I'm picking up that, oh, there's a connection here. So the thing that struck me about this psalm is the how the psalm reveals the relationship between the psalmist, between our and God, between ourselves and God. When I called, you answered me. You increased my strength within me. And though I walk in the midst of trouble, you keep me safe. And the Lord will make good his purpose for me. And he will not abandon the works of his hands. So, and so I was connecting with, yes, all these gods and these distractions and these things that we think about ourselves that are not our best parts. But because of the relationship with God, that healing happens. He takes care of us. The love happens. And so if we're, I don't want to say if we have to work at it because God's grace is free, but if we pay attention to these things, then it becomes easier to let go of those things or to acknowledge, I like to be right all the time. There's no question about that. Most people probably think, some people have figured that out, but if I acknowledge it and let it go, then God's relieving me of that. What were you going to say, David?
Well, I said, we know you are. I acknowledge that. I had one comment, a minor one. It's interesting how in verse 7, partly in verse 6, the pronoun changes.
Oh, yeah.
Always you, God, you, my Lord, my Lord. And then all of a sudden, he distances himself for a moment, but then comes right back to the first person. I have no idea why that happens.
I heard that I read a commentary that talks about how it's a really personal at the beginning. It's almost like it's a singular I and God, and then it turns communal. That's why when you shift to he, right? Because it's much more communal, and then it goes back to the personal. So it has this, it fluctuates from this I and God relationship to a we and God relationship to an I and God relationship. So it's a very personal it can be parts of it are very personal relationship, very personal song.
Like a sine wave, I, and then including everybody else, and then going back. And, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I love just verse 7, and I find that in a lot of the Psalms, right? It's this description of God of justice, God of mercy, God of paying attention to the marginalized. That is a constant describer of how the psalmists describe God. It's just the prophets. I mean, just constantly throughout our scriptures. Is that reminder of God's character of always paying attention to the lowly, to the marginalized, to the poor.
What I like about that verse is that it's like the Lord may be high, but he cares for the lowly. Not only that, he's on to those people that are oppressing the lonely, because he perceives the haughty from afar. He's on to them.
It's almost as though he doesn't want to have much to do with them, with the haughty.
Yeah.
They're self-contented. They're happy enough the way they are.
Well, it's 7:41, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to move on to the New Testament, 1 Corinthians. And I guess I'll go ahead and read this one. 1 Corinthians 15, 1-11. I would remind you, brothers and sisters, of the good news that I proclaimed to you, which you in turn received, in which also you stand, through which also you are being saved, if you hold firmly to the message that I proclaimed to you, unless you have come to believe in vain. For I handed on to you as of first importance what I in turn had received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have died. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. For I am the least of the apostles, unfit to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me has not been in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me. Whether then it was I or they, so we proclaim, and so you have come to believe. And there are several things here. One of the first things is recognizing that everything in the scripture, in the presentation, in the teachings, were developed in an oral culture, and that is promulgated in creedal form. And what we see here is Paul writing down one of the early versions of that creed that he received. He says, I passed on to you what I had received. Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures. He was buried. He was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures. He appeared to Cephas, to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters. And then he adds to it, but that's a very early version of the of a creed, basically. And we find
The Apostles' Creed, right? It's the Apostles' Creed.
Well, it's an early version of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very early iteration of it, very, very early. But those were developing very early in the process. And here we have one being to them. The other thing that I have is that, you know, the good news, the Evangelion that I proclaim to you, which you in turn received, in which also you stand. So you received it in the past, you stand in it now, and through which also you are being saved. It's this whole process. It's never not, and that's would have been axiomatic to anyone that it's what you at the time, but it's something that we tended to lose that connection to, that it's less something that we think about or something that we acknowledge. It is a practice that forms our life. It's something we receive it from others, we stand in it, we inhabit it, we put our bodies into it. That's what standing brings in. You're putting your body into it, and through which also you engage in a process of being saved. The imagery he uses and the way he puts that is just has always struck me as such a example of what it means to engage in spiritual practice, to engage in a spiritual life, to live, basically.
It's so active. They're not nouns, they're verbs.
Yeah. It's a sequence of verbs. And then, of course, Paul's own thing, you know, calling himself the least of the apostles, unfit to be called an apostle because I persecuted the church of God, which is, you know, a theme that Paul returns to in a number of different places. He returns to it in Romans and everything, that it is through the grace of God that he's taken from the position of where he was an enemy of God, which is what he calls himself somewhere, you know, elsewhere, to an apostle, to a messenger, to sent by God. So someone else, or I didn't see whether it was Mike or Victoria first who put up their hand. So
I was first.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
This last emphasizes that it is practice and it is a continuing process. And I get it better now than I did when I was 30 or 12. So I'll continue in the practice and the fellowship, and someday maybe it'll all be over and I'll find myself in glory. Okay, I'm through.
Yeah, Deacon.
So what I'm being struck by is, but by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me has not been in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me. And, there's this thing about Paul. It's like he's telling us the grace of God is there. God gives it freely. You don't have to earn it. And then he turns around and says, and I've had to work so hard to not to earn. I've worked so hard to earn it or to keep it or whatever. But this is so human. This just Paul's always kind of going around in circles this way. I'm just fascinated by it.
Yeah, and I think the more I read Paul, the more, I used to just be really frustrated because I'm like, oh, woe with me, always, Paul always just had this thing. But I think the more I can see him really saying, it's because I have been given so much that's why I can't stop but loving. I can't stop but teaching. I can't stop but telling people of the good news, because I know what that does for you, right? I, of all people, have really experienced this transformation, and I want that for you too, right? I mean, I think that's, and so that's where that call, that constant need to be founding, teaching, encouraging, redirecting, scolding, whatever that may be, depending on what the community's needed. That is something that he does. There's also the sense of this theme throughout, Mike, I was remembering when you led a couple of weeks ago about what's the thread between the lessons. And this one was to me, it seemed very clear. It's this theme, there's this thread of the unworthy, the Isaiah saying, I'm a sinner. Then Paul says, I'm not worthy. And then we'll hear Simon also saying the same thing later, that, get away from me. I cannot be near your presence. You're the worthy presence, right?
Yeah.
I just have a question. What does anyone make of the statement that Paul makes, that Christ appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time? Is there any other reference to that?
No, this is the only one, but it was in an early creedal form, so he treats it as something that they all know. But no, it's
is this
not recorded.
Pentecost?
No, this is Christ appearing, not Pentecost. But no, I mean, even John says not everything that happened was written down, and it's a thing that was preserved in the oral creed that was not included in any of the Gospels. So
Yeah,
this is the only reference to it.
that's what I thought.
And this predates the Gospels. So
Sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which means it predates the book of Acts as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
But all of these were written down after they've been talked about, right? I mean, this is the thing, is what gets written down is not necessarily it's like us writing about an event that has passed, right? And so but that doesn't mean that people weren't talking about it, weren't this, did you hear what happened? Did you see what happened? Right? So these events have been happening, and then eventually they get caught and they get written down.
Well, the way the gospel appearances, and they're all marked, they're vivid, they're clearly witness accounts, but they want the accounts of the 12. They want the accounts of Peter. They want these accounts that are not really recorded anywhere else, that they give you details of the interactions. My thought of it has always been that when the gospel writings were writing, the appearance to 500 people was so many people that it was so well known that the details of it, there wasn't any reason to write it down.
Yeah, it was common knowledge, right?
It's common knowledge, yeah.
Didn't you know that?
Yeah, that was a big. It's not like the little personal exchange between Peter and Jesus, or some of these other things that were not, that were a lot smaller, or the 12 in the upper room, or, you know, some of the things like that. No, that was the appearance to
Yeah, I love that, Scott. It just made you reminded me of that when Jesus appears to the two disciples, and they're walking down and they're talking about it, and Jesus says, well, "What's going on?" And the elector's like, "What do you mean, what's going on? Are you the only one that doesn't know what's happened?" Right? Like it's in the news everywhere. Hello, right? And so
Yeah.
I guess there's some of that of like, yeah, we all know about these events. So.
Yeah, the one thing I did want to point out, because it's used, I mean, we use evangelion to describe it, but Paul uses it here, so it's clearly a very early thing. And you know, this is picked up from scholars because they pointed this out, that we've lost track of this, that in that first century setting in the Roman Empire, evangelion had an established meaning. It wasn't just good news in general. It was a word used for a proclamation of a king. We have a text, it's an inscription of Priene that gives the earliest known usage of it. This is the text. It seemed good to the Greeks of Asia, in the opinion of the high priest Apollonius of Menophilus Azanitas, since Providence, which has ordered all things and is deeply interested in our life, has set in most perfect order by giving us Augustus, whom she filled with virtue that he might benefit humankind, sending him as a savior, both for us and for our descendants, that he might end war and arrange all things. And since he, Caesar, by his appearance, excelled even our anticipations, surpassing all previous benefactors, and not even leaving to posterity any hope of surpassing what he has done, and since the army of the god Augustus was the beginning of the good tidings, evangelion, for the world that came by reason of him, which Asia resolved in Smyrna. That's when they use the word evangelion to describe the good news of Christ, that's what they're proclaiming. That sort of proclamation.
Yeah.
That the king has come, the rightful king, the savior, to end war, arrange all things, surpass all previous, make all things right. That it has a particular nuance. It's not just good news in general. It's that good news.
Which is it's politically late, you know.
Oh yeah.
So that's to say that about a Jew is very revolutionary
in the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
It's like talking about, you know, what's the phrase, something about, you know, showing, you know, just, I think it's like sticking it to the man or something like that, right? It's just like.
So yeah, I did just want to point that out. Did anyone else have any comments? I don't think we'll get to the gospel today. How did that frame your perception, your thoughts about what a gospel means? How we should approach it?
You know, Scott, actually, I was wishing that it was a long excerpt that you read, but
yeah,
what I thought I got from it was that this proclamation, this good news from Caesar, is it's going to make all things right.
Right.
So that's the point of this word evangelia, is that it's not just good, it's going to make things all right.
Right.
So through Jesus Christ, all things will be made right.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's like, it does give me kind of a firmer perspective of the word gospel, good news, evangelia.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Now the proclamation that Scott was reading is purely a pagan statement by a political power.
Yeah.
Who brutally killed a whole bunch of other people to get where he was. They could do an about face and become the savior of his people.
Mhm.
Okay.
Which
And
is
bring
fine.
it into the time of chaos, to the time of troubles, of disruption, of disorder, and bring order and bring peace. Yeah. Now, that's not the same kind of peace or order that Christ proclaims, but it's in that context that they appropriated that word and applied it to Christ. That
Well,
he's
and that's
not.
what
Yeah.
he's not. I'm sorry. What?
Well, he's not Caesar. He's not going to bring that sort of order. He's not going to bring it with, the Pax Romana was a peace enforced with an iron fist, and that was not the peace that Christ is bringing. But he's bringing true peace and true salvation, and order to all things.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Scott. Is this what you're saying is just it's so, and that's why it was so countercultural to call Jesus the Messiah, to talk about the good news of making all things right. And so it was very hard for people who listened to grasp why they would say that about this person who was not, collecting arms, who was not forming an army, who was not using the power of God to destroy the enemy and the adversary, but was talking about loving and kindness and being a servant. It just blew people's minds.
And not only that, Paul is talking using this word in the context of someone who was killed by the Roman authorities as a slave, as in a very brutal way. And, so how can this poor itinerant preacher who was killed on the cross be bringing us good news and making our world right and tidying up our world?
But by also making that claim, this sets Christ in opposition to all of the earthly rulers,
Yes.
Caesars bringing Evangelion. I mean, if you want to understand why Rome reacted so strongly to Christianity, that's why.
Mhm. That's a very important point. That somebody's clock is telling us it's time.
Yeah, it is time.
Father David always lets us
Reverend
know.
My grandmother's mantelpiece clock. Sorry.
No, it's good.
No, that's
Yeah.
good. It's a nice way for us to say it's
Yep.
time.
Yep, it's time.
Exactly. Yeah. For once, it's right on time. Oh,
Well, did anyone have any closing thoughts?
Another good session.
Oh,
yes, indeed.
I appreciate
Sorry,
everyone
I was a bit
contributing.
late. You really got a lot out of this one.
And thank you, Scott, for stepping up and taking the reins of this, of the Christian formation. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was this another one where no one was assigned to, or?
Yeah, no
That's
one was
true.
assigned. Just
yeah.
take it, run.
And no one's assigned to next Wednesday. So if anybody wants to volunteer, this is your moment.
Not me, Lord. I'm not worthy.
The Lord said, "Whom shall I send?"
Good one, Mike. Good one. Very good.
I'm leaving.
Well
Goodbye.
played.
Goodbye,
Well
everybody.
played.
Well, I guess I could say, "Here am I, Lord, send me."
Sure, go
That's
right
great.
ahead. Yay,
Go right
David.
ahead. Yeah, David, Father David.
Thank you.
So
Mike got so scared he left the
Yeah.
meeting.
will I be the moderator next time?
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Father David.
Thank you.
Fine. Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me
All right. Well, Mother Minerva or Deacon Victoria, you were
Well,
raising your hand.
Oh, no, I'm just trying to say goodbye.
Okay. I was going to ask Mother Minerva to close us in prayer.
Yeah, that's great.
Sure. For whom or for what should we pray?
for safety in this bad weather.
Anything
For
else?
Frank, who is being cared for by a medical team, and for whom his family is worrying.
Mhm. Anyone else or anything else?
I would like to request a prayer for one of my cousins, Philip. He's very, very ill and just kind of pretty touch and go. So
Mm.
Where is Philip?
he lives in Hereford,
Wow.
and he has a family, wife and children. So, and he's young. So
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for this day, for this evening in particular, these Wednesday nights where we come together to chew on your sacred texts, to glean through them, through look through them and to look for ways that you are calling us, for ways where you are showing up, for us to be able to get a better sense of who you are and whose we are. We ask you to care for Philip and his family as he is in a place where he sometimes feels better and sometimes feels worse. May the medical doctors and nurses who are caring for him have the wisdom to know how best to care for him, and for the family that they may be prepared for whatever may come. For Frank, that he is cared for and that they find what needs to be found, and that it is something that can be addressed so that he maybe return home where his wife is looking and longing for his return. And we ask for you to care for all of us, especially those who do not have a choice, but have to get up in the morning and go to work or go about their daily lives, that there is no snow day for them, or there is no sick leave or personal days available to them, and they must go out to toil. Protect them and guide them so that they may return safe to their home. And for all the infrastructure that needs to be that it can hold and take care of the needs that we have, both in power and water and everything else that we need to keep our homes comfortable. But it's special things, it's special prayers, God, for those that do not have a home or any shelter and who are out there braving the storm. Open our eyes and our hearts so that as a society, we can share all of our blessings so that one day no one has to be out in the open, but that everybody has what they need. We ask all of this in your son's name. Amen.
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 All right.